I want to acknowledge the 3 declared objects of the Theosophical Society. And to my mind, the presentation today is supporting those 3 objects. So the first one, to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Object 2, to encourage the comparative study of religion, philosophy, and science. 3, to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity. I believe the presentation I'm about to share supports these 3 objects. And to start with, I want to say I have hope for the future. What gives me hope is how we are all drawn to these types of spaces out of an inner sense, a shared inner sense of a greater reality. That greater reality exists, and that it has more meaning, more relevance, and is more unified despite what we see happening in the world. Why do we have this inner sense of greater reality? And is it possible to anchor this reality in the world? The purpose of this talk, Transmission Meditation, a meditation in collaboration with the Masters of Wisdom, is to present one very powerful way that we as individuals, coming together as a group, can help to transform the planet. My intention is to illustrate how that inner sense of a greater reality that many of us experience is not an idealistic notion, but rather an urgent prompting of the soul. I offer to you that participating in transmission meditation is the most powerful way to respond to that prompting. So in our time together, I will share on a number of topics leading up to transmission meditation to give you the context of what this meditation is about. I will describe the source of my information, which comes out of the tradition of esoteric science. I'll explain a basic premise of esoteric science that shows how all of life throughout cosmos is interrelated. I'll show the basic structure of our essential divinity and how meditation in general reorients us towards that divinity. I'll explain 3 great events that are unfolding in the world right now and how our participation in transmission meditation can place us front and center as literally essential workers in those events. Finally, I will describe how we do transmission meditation. Then I'll take your questions, and then we will experience 20 minutes of transmission meditation in collaboration with the Masters of Wisdom. So I hope everyone here and everyone online can stay until the end. I'll be sharing links for free downloads, resources, and more information. And for those of you who made the effort to come in person, you will receive an actual hard copy book of Transmission, a meditation for the new age by Benjamin Creme. And of course, I encourage you to make a donation to the Seattle Theosophical Society. And for those of you online, just because you're not in Seattle doesn't mean you can't participate. You can add your name to the mailing list and be informed of the fantastic events that happen here throughout the week. Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name is Cielito Pascual, and I am a native of South Seattle. And I first learned about transmission meditation after attending a lecture in New York City given by the artist, international lecturer, and esoteric author Benjamin Creme. And that was over 34 years ago. And I've been participating in and hosting transmission groups continuously since that time. I volunteer my time, like many hundreds of others around the world, to make this information available to others. I would like for you to keep in mind that I present this not as dogma, but as an invitation for you to investigate further if you choose. If in the end you think, interesting, but not for me, I will not be the least bit offended. However, if you find what you hear compelling and relevant, I am happy to support you in answering your questions, finding a group to join, or getting your own transmission group started if that's what you choose. Transmission meditation was introduced to the world in 1974 by Benjamin Creme at the behest of one of the Masters of Wisdom, and so is a relatively new development. However, its basic tenets emerge out of the field of esoteric science. What is esoteric science? It is a compendium of the evolution of consciousness, which is as old as humanity itself. It is a repository of wisdom that keeps us informed of humanity's essential divinity throughout our long journey of evolution. And I just saw a question come in, and I welcome your questions, and we will have time after the presentation to go into your questions. So feel free to bring that question up again. Esoteric means hidden. Throughout the ages, the teachings were recognized by traditions particular to the East, and certain disciplines were made available only to qualified students. But an initiative was begun by the masters of wisdom to make the esoteric knowledge available to the general public. And of course, students of Theosophy knew that this process of revelation began in 1888 with Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, in cooperation with one of the senior members of the Master of Wisdom. And that was when she published her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine. This was known as the preparatory phase of revelation. This was followed by the extraordinary work of Alice A. Bailey and Helena Roerich. You can see them on the screen here. Alice A. Bailey and Helena Roerich represented the intermediate phase of revelation, which spanned roughly the same time from the 1920s to the end of the 1950s. The most recent phase of revelation was brought forward by Benjamin Creme, the foremost exponent covering the emergence phase of the esoteric wisdom. The emergence phase bears on two events that are unfolding today, and I'll explain more about what that means shortly. So as a result of his work, from around 1970 to his passing in 2016, Benjamin Creme, it was through his work that transmission groups have been initiated in 72 countries with 600 groups meeting on an ongoing basis worldwide. Now, to lay a groundwork for clarity, I want to show you a diagram that will help to orient ourselves to a major premise of esoteric science, that throughout the cosmos, at every level, there exists consciousness, purpose, and evolution. Esoteric science, or the Ageless Wisdom teaching, as it is also known, recognizes that divinity descends into matter, manifesting through a vehicle in order to have expression on the lower planes. The evolution of consciousness is the journey of return. Oops, we're going backwards. We're going backwards in our evolution. Pardon me. Yeah, let's catch up. So the journey of return of that consciousness back to its source is the evolution of consciousness, going back to divinity. So from the level of the atoms on up to the diversity of species within the kingdoms of nature, all the way up to astronomical bodies such as a planet, a solar system, a galaxy, and beyond. Every form is a vehicle for a singular expression of consciousness, purpose, and evolution. It's important to note that the movement of consciousness is always an upward progression. Every level, get that guy out of the screen so you can see. Every level, as it expands in consciousness, moves up to the level of awareness above it. And the stimulus, spiritual stimulus, which is part of the evolution of consciousness, is always a movement downwards. So what that means is that spiritual stimulus originates from the greater consciousness to nourish and galvanize all the levels of consciousness below it. This downflow of stimulus occurs throughout cosmos. And I'll bring up this idea of spiritual stimulus again. As consciousness expands in the human kingdom, the work of a group known as disciples and initiates becomes apparent. Who are the disciples and initiates? They include well-known forward thinkers of every age, pioneering advances in thought in all areas of human endeavor: science, philosophy, politics, art, music, religion, social issues, etc. These are the Einsteins, the Gandhis, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the Helen Kellers, the Marie Curies, the Helena Petrovna Blavatskys of every age. Gautama Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad are recognized as the great disciples of their time. New civilizations are built on the basis of the visionary thinking that emerges from this group. The ideas and ideals they introduce are gradually stepped down through educational processes and institutions until they become generally accepted principles by the populace. This can happen quickly within a couple of generations. And as those great thinkers advance in their consciousness, they move into a higher level of expression, into the spiritual kingdom, also known as the spiritual hierarchy, referring to a hierarchy of consciousness, not of power. Members of this group are referred to as the masters of wisdom or the lords of compassion. Finally, let's understand ourselves as individuals. So the Ageless Wisdom says that the human is the necessary vehicle of divinity. Divinity cannot manifest at this dense physical level. It requires a vehicle, and that is the individual personality that we are all sometimes uncomfortably familiar with. It's you, it's me, it's the physical body that we exist in. And that personality is made up, it's called the threefold personality because it's made up of the mental body, the emotional body, and the physical body. It is the vehicle for the soul, which is itself an intermediary vehicle for an even higher expression, which is, anyone can guess, the monad. Some of us know that term. That might be a new term for you. The monad is also known as the divine self, also known as the spark of God that resides in every human being. The esoteric science recognizes the principle of reincarnation, and most all of us, I would say all of us up to this point, have lived hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, living as hundreds of thousands of personalities. We have incarnated countless times as male and female, as rich and poor, as laborer and intellectual, as artist and scientist, even as the oppressor and the oppressed. We return life after life, drawn back into incarnation by the law of karma, in order to resolve karma and to experience every nuance of human existence. So who we think we are is really a tiny fragment of our total beingness. There's so much more that we have yet to acknowledge. So evolution of consciousness is that expansion of recognition of who we truly are. Transmission meditation exponentially quickens that process of recognition. So, for further clarity, let's talk about the purpose of meditation. Any meditation is a more or less scientific method for establishing contact with the soul. Why do we want to establish contact with the soul? Because by doing so, we are approaching our true identity. The personality that we are so strongly identified with in this physical plane existence is simply a temporary vehicle, and yet we think that is the totality of who we are. That identification is the source of conflict, pain, and struggle. As I mentioned earlier, we are drawn back into this cycle of incarnation repeatedly under the law of karma, because as we generate karma, we have to return to resolve that karma until one day, there's some hope here, we begin to respond to the promptings of the soul. What does that look like? Remember when I mentioned that stimulus comes from a greater consciousness and flows down to the lower? Well, the soul has waited patiently, life after life after life, every once in a while, sending a downflow of energy, providing stimulus that for a long time goes unheeded. Until one day you get an inkling. You think, I want to do something that's more meaningful, that really just moves my heart. I want to do some volunteer work. Or, meditation sounds pretty good. I got to look into that. Put that on your to-do list. If you take action based on that stimulus, you are now responding to the promptings of your soul. There is only one purpose of the soul. There's only one purpose, and that is to serve. You take on a field of service that brings your focus onto the larger world. Beyond self-interest, you start to meditate. You begin to reorient away from selfish interests and towards selfless interest. If you take these actions with consistency, you will begin to demonstrate the qualities of your soul. Meditation, as well as service, builds a bridge, an invisible channel of light between the physical brain and the soul, and eventually a bridge is built from the soul to the monad, the divine spark. It's called the Antakarana. In the coming time, the science of the Antakarana will become a major science, along with the science of meditation and the science of service. They're all interrelated, because it's about building subjective connections between the lower and higher aspects of ourselves, between the human kingdom and the spiritual kingdom, and also all throughout cosmos, planetary, systemic, and galactic. So going back to the individual human, the Antakarana is built from the personality to the soul as we do more service, as we do more meditation, but also by doing meditation and service, you attract the attention of your soul. Your soul has been oriented towards the monad most of the time, and then it starts to hear something going on downstairs. And it says, oh, I'm going to switch my attention to that human. And the soul starts to build the Antakarana towards the personality, towards you. Eventually, the soul will have a way to pour its energies and its qualities into its vehicle, into you. Esotericist Benjamin Creme describes building this connection to the soul with spiritual tension. And he says, this process of creating and sustaining is the important thing, a continuous spiritual tension in life where the aspiration becomes less and less astral or emotional and more mental and eventually spiritual, enables the soul to really work through its vehicles. One eventually becomes what is called a soul-infused personality. This is a process that can span several lifetimes, but once it starts, and once the personality, you, consciously takes its own evolution in hand, advancement can take place quickly. You begin to see this change, for example, when your life changes, your values change, you set aside self-oriented desires to do the work that will help in the larger picture. Transmission meditation can exponentially speed up this activity of soul infusement because it is based on science that it has in common with the science of the Antakarana. Transmission is a fusion of two yogas, Karma Yoga, which is the yoga of service I mentioned earlier, and Laya Yoga, which is the yoga of the chakras or the yoga of energies. It is through scientific stimulation of the chakras. Maybe I mean more spiritual stimulation, but it's also a scientific process. And through correct meditation that the Antakarana is built. Proper building of the Antakarana leads to a life of service, meditation, service, and connection with one's soul through the Antakarana leads to the dynamically creative life we've seen demonstrated by the great disciples and initiates throughout the ages. On top of all that science, there is the potency that is the result of coming together as a group. It's simply common sense that more is accomplished when people come together than one works alone, when one works alone. In fact, the masters of wisdom are building a group Antakarana out of the activity of all the transmission groups around the world. What does that mean? Well, it's a science that's a little beyond me, but what I would say that means is that in effect, transmission meditation is really a gift from the gods. Where else can you exponentially speed up your journey of evolution, perhaps cut back on the number of lifetimes you have to return to resolve your karma while sitting with your eyes closed? It is a powerful arena of service and meditation and the expansion of consciousness. It is said that 1 year of consistent transmission meditation is equal to 15 to 30 years of individual meditation. Now, I am going to continue to set the context for why transmission meditation is so vital for what's happening in the world today. And I'll do this by describing 3 unprecedented events that are unfolding. If only one of these events seem plausible to you, that may be reason enough to do transmission. The first event has essentially already taken place, but the world is grappling with the repercussions. We have just completed a 2,500 year cycle of the Piscean age, and we have fully entered into the Aquarian age. Any astronomer at any observatory recognizes this as a fact. Esoteric science has an understanding of its underlying energetic dimensions. To discuss this in detail involves a whole other presentation, but suffice it to say that all the conflict and upheaval we are seeing in the world is a result of the influx of Aquarian energies coming up against Piscean era systems. For example, our economic and political systems around the world are based and built upon Piscean energy, which is now in retreat. These systems will not be able to sustain themselves as Aquarian energies mount in potency. An example of this can be seen in the recent volatility of the stock market and the recent collapse of certain banks. And we've seen economic roiling for the past 30 years, 30, 40 years. The energies of Aquarius flooding our planet are the energies of synthesis and of sharing and cooperation. Some of us are sensing these energies and embracing them, anticipating a future of great possibilities. Others of us are resisting mightily, especially those who want to remain with the status quo. This underlies many of the most significant divisions and conflicts in the world. It's a very perilous time. It's during these difficult transitions of ages that occur cyclically throughout our history when a great teacher steps forward to guide humanity into the new time. You may be familiar with names of some of them: Hercules, Hermes, Rama, Mithra, Shankaracharya, Krishna, Buddha, and the Christ. This connects to the second event taking place, the emergence into the modern world of not just one individual, but a group. Humanity's great elders, the members of the spiritual kingdom, the great beings that I've been referring to as the masters of wisdom. Now, to become a master of wisdom, you must achieve complete harmlessness. At that point, you no longer generate karma. So you no longer have to resolve karma. You are liberated from the life process, no longer drawn into reincarnation over and over and over. You could advance to higher planes on other planets or even beyond our solar system to continue your path of evolution. And we are all literally on our way to becoming masters. The masters of wisdom who have worked with humanity have chosen to sacrifice their own advancement to remain with us, to guide and inspire us on our own evolutionary journey. For eons, for epochs, they have dwelled in the most remote regions of the earth, from within rugged alpine terrain of the great mountain ranges to untouched desert regions. From behind the scenes, they have worked with the disciples and initiates of the world. Now, the masters work in two different ways with disciples. The first way is through impression on the mental planes, in which the disciple may not be aware of the master, or through direct telepathic rapport, where there is a known, acknowledged, and oftentimes, a lifelong relationship. All the great advances of humankind have been inspired by the spiritual stimulus, coming from these great elders, precipitating as ideas into the minds of the great thinkers of a particular age, and over time to be incorporated into the knowledge and wisdom of a civilization. And that is how we advance as humanity. Now, in 1425, a big change started to occur. As our solar system began its approach towards the Aquarian age, the masters of wisdom recognized that the time would soon come for their immediate emergence into the open arena of the world. Alice A. Bailey was the first to go into detail about this process of emergence in her book, The Reappearance of the Christ. Benjamin Creme, in his numerous books, continued her work with a modern update that was unambiguous. He said a certain number of masters of wisdom have already walked the pavements of the cities of the world, have already interacted with world leaders and ordinary people alike. They are ready to help us navigate this difficult transition of ages. And this leads us to the third event that is unfolding, the emergence into full public life of the most senior member of the spiritual kingdom, the one I like to call humanity's eldest brother, the one who was the first of Earth humanity to achieve complete harmlessness. His personal name is Maitreya, given to him by his master, which means the joyful one. He achieved liberation countless tens of thousands of years, I'm going to correct that. He achieved liberation thousands of years ago at such a rapid speed because throughout his incarnations, it is said he never repeated a mistake. Maitreya is one of us and is also a spiritual giant. His own group of disciples, the masters of wisdom, regard him with great respect and reverence. They regard him as their leader. Maitreya fulfills the expectations of the world's religions and many indigenous traditions for the return of a great teacher. Christians expect the return of the Christ. Jews anticipate the return of the Messiah. Buddhists await Maitreya Buddha. Muslims expect the Imam Mahdi, and Hindus foresee the arrival of Krishna. Many indigenous cultures have legends that depict a similar motif. Maitreya doesn't claim to be any of these figures, but knows that is how many will recognize him. The term Christ, as it is understood by the esotericists, is similar to how we know the term president. It is the name of the office held by the one who sits at the head of the spiritual kingdom. So Maitreya is recognized as the Christ for the age of Aquarius. He will hold that office for the entirety of the age, about 2,000 to 2,250 years, and then he will advance on his journey of evolution. Another master of wisdom will then take up the office of the Christ for the following age of Capricorn. And it goes on from there. According to Benjamin Creme, and this bears on what's been happening in the world in the past 40-some years, Maitreya appeared to and influenced the actions of Mikhail Gorbachev, which led to the ending of the Cold War and the opening up of the Soviet Union. Maitreya appeared to Nelson Mandela while he was still imprisoned in Robben Island, just prior to his release and the remarkable end of apartheid and his election as the president of South Africa. And appeared to Princess Diana, who then reoriented her life in service to the poor and the sick and was known for her extraordinary healing presence. Yasser Arafat and King Hussein of Jordan worked under the direct inspiration and guidance of Maitreya in their efforts to secure a just land agreement for the Palestinian people. One can easily spend an hour laying out a timeline of Maitreya's influence on major world events of the past 40 years. Now, Maitreya's purpose is not to establish a new religion, but to galvanize all of humanity, people of all religions and those who are a-religious, to abolish forever the scourge of hunger and to prioritize food, shelter, healthcare, and education as fundamental human rights, established on the basis of a global system of sharing. Maitreya has said, without sharing, there can be no justice. Without justice, there can be no peace. Without peace, there can be no future. Benjamin Creme has said that Maitreya is working towards a specific event where he will present who he is and his relationship to us, to all of the world simultaneously in a globally coordinated press conference. At this press conference, Maitreya will outline great possibilities for humanity in the coming new time. He will present a choice to all of us, and he will do so without speaking. But we will hear his message clearly inside our heads in our own language. In essence, we will be asked to make a choice between continuing with the status quo, a world based on greed and competition, which will invariably lead to the destruction of all life on the planet, or to go in the direction that befits our true stature as divine beings by implementing the principle of sharing as the foundation of our political, economic, and social structures. Maitreya, Creme says, is here to galvanize us, to inspire us, to guide us, and to evoke from us what is already within. In light of these events I just described, I would say that transmission meditation is clearly an embossed invitation on a silver platter from the Masters of Wisdom, presenting the chance to help shape humanity's destiny and prepare the way forward into the future time. Now, we'll get into exactly what happens in a transmission meditation. Again, if you find only one of those events anywhere near plausible, in my mind, that's enough of a reason to do transmission meditation. In fact, you do not need to believe everything I say, or even anything I say, to be actually effective in transmission meditation, because it has to do with science and not belief. It is based on the science of triangles, a science that at the moment is comprehended only by the Masters of Wisdom. Alice Bailey was the first to bring attention to this science through the triangles movement. Some of you may be familiar with it. Transmission is an upgrade of that concept based on the premise that energy sent through three people gathered together is more powerful than if it was sent through three separate individuals. So three people form one triangle, and this is the basic foundation for a transmission group. As more people join, there is an arithmetical and exponential progression of the number of triangles created, as well as numerous additional geometric configurations that further potentize the powerful energies the masters direct through a transmission group. This then creates a vast network of light connecting these groups throughout the world. It is said that transmission is probably the most important work any of us can easily be engaged in, whatever other service activity we might be doing. At this time, transmission is of critical importance in creating a pool of energy and helping to invoke Maitreya and the masters into the outer arena of the world to enable them to begin their work with us. So what takes place in a transmission meditation? Typically, ongoing transmission meditation groups take place in someone's home. It could be in a meeting room of a community place where you don't have interruptions. Because of COVID, I initiated hosting transmission meditation on Zoom, and today there are meetings practically every day of the week in nearly any time zone in the world. Whenever a group gathers, we all say out loud a non-denominational prayer known as the Great Invocation. Some of you may be familiar with that. The Great Invocation is like a bell. It lets the masters know that a group has gathered so they can begin sending energies through that group. The Great Invocation, as it is said today, is translated, it's also been translated into many languages. It's an interpretation of a series of deeply occult mystical phrases that originated in an ancient sacred tongue. Alice Bailey, in her book, The Reappearance of the Christ, said that the Great Invocation was once only allowed to be used by the highest, most exalted beings. But in June of 1945, when Maitreya announced that he would be coming forward into the world as soon as possible with his group, the Masters of Wisdom, he used the Great Invocation himself for the first time and released its translation to the world to enable ordinary people to invoke the energies needed to bring about the emergence of Maitreya and the spiritual hierarchy. You can actually find a recording on YouTube of Eleanor Roosevelt saying the Great Invocation as she inaugurates World Invocation Day from the United Nations in 1952. After the group says the Great Invocation, it's very simple. We hold our attention at the point between the eyebrows, at the center known as the Ajna center. So it's just the point between the eyebrows. And what that Ajna center is a chakra. A chakra is simply a vortex of energy that results from the interweaving of multiple streams of energy originating from our etheric body and also originating outside of our etheric body. This is the energetic counterpart to our physical body. Some of you may have heard the term the etheric planes of the physical plane. We know solid, gaseous, and liquid on our in our science books, but above those levels are 4 levels of the etheric planes. And every physical being, every human being has an etheric body that's on the etheric planes. And it's interesting to note that not only are there chakras in our bodies, there's 7 major chakras and many more minor chakras. There are chakras of a nation. There are chakras of a planet. There are chakras of a solar system and beyond. So the Ajna center in our physical body synthesizes all the energies flowing through the lower chakras. And whenever you hold the attention at the Ajna center, you align yourself with the soul. And you can do that at any time. You don't have to wait to be in a transmission meditation group to hold your attention at the Ajna center, the point between the eyebrows. You can actually, if you're experiencing a strong emotional reaction, bring your attention to the Ajna center, and you might find that you are better able to stand apart from that emotional reaction. When we are aligned with our soul, the masters of wisdom can then direct energies through our upper chakras, typically the heart, the throat, and the Ajna center. They are receiving these energies from various sources, from Maitreya himself, who is in turn receiving energies from two great cosmic avatars, the avatar of synthesis and the spirit of peace and equilibrium. They are providing the spiritual stimulus from above to benefit the levels of consciousness below. The effect of the energies of these avatars on the world is tremendous and is an additional reason to have hope for the future. Again, that's a whole nother topic, and it would be great to present that topic here. Maitreya is also receiving cosmic energies from his brother, the Buddha. He directs these incredibly potent energies to the masters of wisdom. They in turn direct them through the chakras of the participants in a transmission meditation group, in effect, stepping down these very, very potent energies so that they are usable by humanity. Otherwise, these exceptional energies would simply bounce off of humanity and we would derive no benefit from them. So essentially, a transmission meditation group performs in much the same way as an electrical transformer, which converts high voltage electricity that has the power to kill you into safe and usable household current. So our participation is literally required to step down these cosmic and solar and planetary energies. The masters need our participation. As the energies pass through the chakras of the participants in the group, the masters of wisdom, who are also master scientists, direct the energy on out into the world. At the right potency, the proper quality, the correct intensity, to areas of the world that need it. Or they might do the opposite. They might withdraw energies, for instance, from an area of conflict and war in order to bring about a cessation of hostilities. Only they know how to direct the energies into the world, and fortunately for us, that is not our responsibility. We simply come together on a regular basis, sit down, say the great invocation, hold our attention at the Ajna Center, and we are participating in this extraordinary, extraordinary process. So in a practical sense, transmission groups sit on average 2 hours. That sounds like a long time, but the more you do transmission meditation, the more you feel drawn to doing it. I host a group twice a week on Zoom. We're going to in a 2 hours, 2.5 hours, but you don't have to, you're not required to stay the full time. And during transmission, you'll find your mind wandering, which is perfectly normal. And all you have to do to get back into alignment with your soul is to inwardly sound the Om, which will automatically bring your attention back up to the Ajna Center. You don't have to sound Om constantly. You don't have to say Om, 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 only when your attention has dropped. And a couple more points about transmission meditation. It is recommended that if you have been diagnosed with a mental health issue, if you've been diagnosed as a schizophrenic, if you have heart issues, if you have a pacemaker, it's recommended you find another field of service other than transmission meditation, because the energies of transmission, though very safe, might be too stimulating. There's never a charge for transmission meditation, and young people from the age of 13 on up can participate. Younger than 13, the chakras are not developed enough to have those level of energies sent through them. And that's all there is to transmission meditation. Very, very simple. Yet the rewards for yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, as well as the rewards for the world are enormous. When you participate in a transmission group, You are part of an experimental global network of light created by Maitreya the Christ, which will prepare the minds and hearts of humanity to build the new world that we all envision. Thank you.